Every year, millions of gardeners sweep up fallen branches, prune thick limbs, and haul away rotting logs as if they were useless waste. We stack them, burn them, or pay to have them removed, never thinking twice about what they could become. Yet in a remote mountain valley, where rainfall is scarce and summer heat cracks the soil open like dry clay, one farmer buried those same logs beneath his garden beds and grew food that never needed watering, never needed fertilizer, and kept producing year after year. No chemicals, no irrigation systems, just buried wood. Why was this forgotten? This is the story of the tree that feeds you forever. In the 1960s, a German horticulturist named Hermann, Andrew began experimenting with something that most of his colleagues considered absurd. While others were investing in chemical fertilizers and irrigation systems, he was digging trenches and filling them with rotting logs, branches, and leaves. The idea wasn't new. Farmers in Eastern Europe had quietly practiced it for generations, long before industrial agriculture took over. But Andrew documented it in detail, refining what would later become known as hugelkultur, a method so effective it bordered on unbelievable. At first, his neighbors laughed. The sight of raised mounds stuffed with decaying wood looked chaotic compared to the clean, flat rows promoted by modern farming. Agricultural inspectors warned him that his methods were unproductive, inefficient, even dangerous. There were threats of fines for improper land use, and pressure to conform to standardized practices. Flat land was easier for machines. Uniform soil was easier to manage, but Andrew refused to abandon what he was seeing with his own eyes. The first season was unimpressive. Plants struggled. Growth was slow. The buried would absorb nitrogen as it began to decompose, temporarily starving crops. Critics pointed to this as proof the method didn't work. But Andrew persisted. By the second year, something changed. The soil darkened. Moisture lingered longer after rain. The plants grew taller, greener. By year 3, the transformation was undeniable. The control plot nearby turned pale and dry under summer heat, its leaves curling and brittle. But the hugelkultur mound exploded in deep emerald green. Tomatoes climbed higher than expected. Squash spread wide, their leaves thick and glossy. When he dug his hands into the soil, it didn't feel like dirt anymore. It crumbled like chocolate cake, soft, rich, alive. But the story doesn't end there. As his results spread, so did resistance. Agricultural authorities dismissed it as impractical for large-scale farming. Seed and fertilizer companies ignored it entirely. And while a few small farmers quietly adopted the method, it never reached mainstream agriculture. Not because it failed, but because it didn't fit the system. Follow the money. The global fertilizer market was valued at over $200 billion in recent years. Entire industries depend on farmers buying nutrients season after season. A method that turns free yard waste into a self-sustaining system for 20 years threatens that model completely. When a solution costs zero and lasts decades, there's nothing left to sell. Flat field became the standard not because they were more productive, but because they were easier for machines. Tractors, harvesters, and irrigation systems all require uniform surfaces. Hugelkultur mounds disrupt that. They are uneven, organic, unpredictable. And in an agricultural economy driven by efficiency and scale, anything that doesn't fit the machinery gets left behind. But the story gets darker. As industrial farming expanded, knowledge like this was labeled outdated, inefficient, even primitive. Generations of farmers were taught to rely on inputs instead of ecosystems. The idea that soil could build itself, feed itself, and sustain crops without constant intervention became almost unthinkable. What was once common knowledge faded into obscurity. And yet, the science never disappeared. Laboratory tests show that heavily decomposed wood can absorb water equal to 5 times its dry weight, over 500%. That means a single buried log acts like a massive underground reservoir, storing moisture during rain and releasing it slowly during drought. Field measurements confirmed this effect in real conditions. In trials conducted at Washington State University, soil built on wood-based mounds retained between 40 to 60% moisture during peak summer, while adjacent control plots dropped below 25%. The difference wasn't subtle. It was a difference between survival and failure. In controlled trials, researchers at the University of British Columbia measured plant growth in hugelkultur systems compared to traditional beds. Yields increased by up to 30% after the second year, with significantly reduced need for irrigation and fertilizer inputs. A 2023 meta-analysis covering over 150 soil ecology studies found that organic matter decomposition, especially woody material, increased microbial diversity by more than 100%. This microbial activity directly improves nutrient availability, allowing plants to access what they need without synthetic inputs. But here's where it gets interesting. The real power of this system isn't just water storage or nutrient release. It's the way everything works together beneath the surface. Think of buried wood as an underground sponge. When rain falls, the wood absorbs it, holding it deep in the soil where evaporation can't reach it. During dry periods, that stored water slowly seeps back into the surrounding soil, keeping roots hydrated even when the surface looks dry. As the wood decays, its structure changes. Lignin breaks down into a network of microscopic chambers, increasing porosity. Laboratory measurements show that decomposed wood can drop to densities as low as 0.2 grams per cubic centimeter, creating vast internal space for water and air. At the same time, fungi colonize the wood, forming networks that connect plant roots across the bed. These mycorrhizal networks act like biological highways, transporting nutrients and moisture directly to where they are needed most. Plant roots sense this environment and respond by growing deeper, thicker, more resilient. This isn't magic. It's basic soil ecology. Now comes the part most people get wrong. Building this system isn't complicated, but it requires precision. A backyard becomes a starting point. A trench, 2 feet deep and as long as needed, is dug into the soil. The deeper the trench, the longer the system will last. Logs go in first, thick ones at the bottom, ideally hardwood if available. Even partially rotted wood works. In fact, older wood is better because it absorbs water more quickly. Branches follow, filling the gaps between logs. Smaller twigs pack tightly, creating layers. Then comes a mix of organic material, grass clippings, leaves, kitchen scraps, anything that would normally be thrown away. This layer provides the nitrogen needed to balance the carbon-rich wood. Soil goes back on top, forming a raised mound. At least 1 foot of soil should cover the wood completely. Press it down firmly but not compacted. The texture should feel slightly springy underfoot, not hard like packed date. Water the mound thoroughly once. This is critical. The first soaking activates the entire system, saturating the wood and starting the decomposition process. After that, watering becomes minimal. Never skip the nitrogen layer. Without it, plants will struggle in the first year. The wood will pull nitrogen from the soil, slowing growth. Adding compost or fresh green material prevents this imbalance. Within the first few weeks, the mound begins to settle. You may notice slight warmth when touching the soil early in the morning. That heat comes from microbial activity breaking down the organic material. Planting starts immediately. In the first year, choose light feeders, lettuce, beans, peas. By year 2, heavier crops like tomatoes, corn, and squash thrive. One farmer took this one step further, stacking multiple layers of wood and organic material to create beds that lasted over 20 years without reapplication. The results were consistent: less water, fewer inputs, higher yields. But challenges do appear. Year 1 will be the most difficult. Wood consumes nitrogen as it decomposes. Expect slower growth. Adding compost monthly offsets this. By year 2, the system flips. Decomposition accelerates, and nutrients become available. This is when growth surges. If plants yellow early, the issue is nitrogen deficiency. Add fresh compost or diluted manure tea immediately. If the mound dries out faster than expected, the wood layer may be too thin. Future builds should include larger logs for better water retention. In colder climates, decomposition slows. Covering the mound with mulch helps retain heat and moisture. In hot regions, deeper trenches improve water storage. Cost comparisons are striking. Traditional raised beds can cost over $200 in soil and amendments. This system uses materials that cost zero. Fallen branches, yard waste, kitchen scraps, all free. The industry charges for inputs year after year. Nature builds a system that improves over time. By year 3, something remarkable happens. The soil becomes darker, richer, almost black. It holds water like a sponge, yet drains perfectly. You can squeeze it in your hand, and it stays together before crumbling apart. Plants root deeper, grow stronger, resist drought. The real shock comes in year 2, but the real payoff comes in year 3 and beyond. Bury wood and it becomes water. Bury wood and it becomes fertilizer. Bury wood and it becomes life. Bury wood and it becomes soil that feeds your garden for decades. The fertilizer industry wants you to buy bags every spring. What legacy will your garden leave? This week, dig one trench. Bury one log. Start one system that could outlast you. And when you see the difference, when your soil turns dark and your plants thrive without constant care, share your first experiment in the comments below.